We're up to Calgary in this lowest points series, and you know what's interesting for me with Calgary is that despite them having numerous jerseys, including this one, that fans may not be big fans of themselves, I like almost every jersey Calgary's put out. I'm not saying that everything Flames has been fantastic, but because red and black are my favorite colors, Calgary works. And honestly, and that includes Blasty there. I don't have a problem with Blasty. Is it ugly? Yep. Does that make it better? To some people, myself included, it kind of sort of does. Um, so yeah, and it really, in all honesty, the history of the Calgary Flames does involve Atlanta as well. So I have to mention the Atlanta Flames in this. When we get into the year 1 and year 11 stuff, you're not going to see Atlanta Flames here. This is Calgary Flames stuff, but Atlanta does deserve a mention. Atlanta is responsible for 28% of the Canadian hockey teams in the league right now. Let marinate on that. That without Atlanta being given to expansion teams, we probably don't have a team in Calgary, and we definitely don't have a team back in Winnipeg. It is bizarre. So, thanks Atlanta, I guess. So, if we're going to talk about the Flames, we're going to start off with most losses. Mika Kiprusoff with 192. Yes, Kiprusoff was overplayed. I also thought Kiprusoff, personally, I thought there were points where he might have been overrated a little bit as well. Now, I'm not saying that he was overrated in general, just there were certain points during his career where I thought he was probably playing more games than another goaltender probably should have, and it might have been because they expected more of him than they should have as well. So those 192 losses, it's worthy of note. He's also their all-time wins leader. Lost asset, pick him. Honestly, you can go with the Doug Gilmour trade to Toronto. That was a disaster. That was a disaster. You could go with the Al MacInnis exit of Calgary. That didn't work out very well for the Flames either. And of course, Brett Hull. You can make the argument that the Brett Hull trade got them what they needed to win a Stanley Cup in 1989. You can also make the argument if they don't trade Brett Hull, they probably would have won more Stanley Cups. So, overall for me, I'm going to go with Brett Hull, but I'm sure there are others. Jarome Iginla didn't win a Stanley Cup there either. And Jarome Iginla, when he got moved to Pittsburgh, it felt like that was a sad end to that era, that he had tried to drag him there, and it just didn't happen. So, yeah, there's a lot when it comes to lost assets when it's Calgary's turn. Don't worry, when I get down to Vancouver, going to be a lot of those as well. Short-term coach Guy Chiron was coach for 16 games, 6-7-3 record. Again, these are interim coaches usually. And their current coach, Jeff Ward, that's why there's an asterisk there, because he's current, 24-15-3 is the second shortest term coach. We'll see if he's done enough with that 24-15-3 record to warrant bringing him back next year. I would say yes, but I don't know what Calgary's thinking is going to be about next season and what they're going to do. The not in the Hall category. So again, the highest point producer that is retired that is not in the Hall of Fame. Jarome Iginla will get in. So Jarome Iginla's there just on technicality. He just hasn't been put in the Hall of Fame yet. Theoren Fleury not being in the Hall of Fame, I still disagree with that. I vehemently disagree with Theoren Fleury not being in the Hall of Fame. I think he was an excellent player. I think he was a player who proved that he could overcome his size. I would say that he belongs to be in there for virtually the same reasons as Marty St. Louis. So, yeah, Theoren Fleury, it still surprises me. And I do sometimes wonder if when they're voting on who goes in and who doesn't, if having a reputation for being somewhat difficult might make it more of an issue. Because Fleury did at times during his career have sort of that reputation. He bounced around a bit too, but still, not in the Hall of Fame. It seems weird to me. And Mika Kiprusoff in net. I don't think Kiprusoff's a Hall of Fame goaltender, but absolutely deserves any and all honorables from the Calgary Flames that are provided to him, because he was a fantastic goaltender for a while. Now, when we talk about the Flames and we get into droughts, playoff droughts, 1997 through 2003, they went 7 years without a Stanley Cup. And there were years during that drought where it looked like they might never get back there again. It was mismanaged all over. And then suddenly they were in it. And then they went to a Stanley Cup final in 2004. So it just shows just how quickly things can turn around. Now, for Atlanta, things turned around in the wrong direction. Their first year, they were 25, 38, and 15, 65 points. 79-80, their last year, which was their 8th season, 35, 32, and 13 for 83 points. They were an okay team, a team that wasn't drawing very well, and they weren't a team that was going very far in the playoffs. So they moved to Calgary. That first year in Calgary, 39, 27, and 14, 92 points, and they went on a run in the playoffs. So that's one of those things that, I do feel bad for the city of Atlanta. I'm being honest. I do. Although the Omni wasn't very good and the Atlanta Flames really didn't work there. 90-91, so 10 years after, in year 11 in Calgary, 46, 26, and 8, 100 points. And they also won a Stanley Cup in 1989 after going to a finals in 1986. Not too shabby for the Calgary Flames. And it does show that they had greater success in Calgary than they did in Atlanta. But they also had better management. Some of the management decisions by the Atlanta Flames were just poorly thought out. Lowest point percentage against any given team against Vegas. They have a .273 winning percentage. Now, since it's a small sample size. Boston, 401. They have a 401 winning percentage against Boston. Goals for per game, their lowest is against Minnesota. So again, teams from 92 expansion and beyond. 2.28. So there you go. They only scored 2.28 goals per game against Minnesota. And they had some close games against them this year, so story checks out. Most goals against per game against Vegas. They allow 3.82 goals against per game. I'm guessing most of that's in Vegas, not in Calgary. But again, because of a small sample size versus Boston and versus Philadelphia, they allow 3.46 goals per game. So kind of a surprise there. Edmonton's not on the list. Edmonton was not the team they allowed the most goals against per game. They had an easier time with Edmonton apparently in the 80s than other teams did. Now, lowest points per games played, minimum of 100 games played. And again, it's going to be basically enforcers and defensive defensemen on this list. Ladislav Schmid scored .064 points per game when he was a Flame. Brandon Bolig, 0.078. Brian Mcgrattan, 0.109. Brett Kulak, who is still an active player, .109, and of course, defenseman. And Craig Berube, .115, which amongst enforcers, not bad. That's not a number you're going to look at and say, oh, Berube sucked at it. No, Berube, again, of players who played 100 or more games, that's not as bad as for a lot of the enforcers. Lowest save percentage, minimum of 50 games played, and I have to admit, I was surprised by this list. I was legitimately surprised by this list. Don Edwards leads it at 874. Pat Riggin, 877. And I'm just going to go ahead and, as an aside, mention that during that 81 run, became a huge Pat Riggin fan. And Lemelin as well. Lemelin's not on the board here. Rick Walmsley, 878. So, of course, he was part of the return for Brett Hull. And Mike Vernon had an 883 career save percentage with Calgary, which is surprising to me. Because Mike Vernon, I do remember in the 80s being one of the best goaltenders in the league. So it shows that save percentages in the 80s were pretty abysmal. So when we go through teams that played during the 80s, you're often going to see goaltenders from that era on the list. I'll be interested to see, though, once we get to the original 6 teams, like Chicago, Detroit, Toronto, Montreal, Rangers, what kind of list we're looking at. And if it's still just made up of 80s, or if it's going to involve goaltenders from the 70s, 60s, etc. Goalie with the best name, I have to go with Yoni Ordio. One of my favorite names ever was Yoni Ordio, and I was so disappointed that he didn't end up making it at the NHL level. Pretty sure he played here in Abbotsford as well for the Abbotsford Heat. It's one of those reasons I really wish I'd come out and watch Heat games. And really the whole thing with the Calgary organization is they do have the one Stanley Cup, which is one more than some other teams have. And it's been a team that's been trying to get back to where they were in the late 80s, early 90s. And it's been tough because when you're trading out Brett Hull, when you're making the Doug Gilmour trade, when you're losing guys like Mike Vernon, you're losing McInnes, you're losing Gary Roberts. When you're losing players of that stature, and they had trouble with their development system for a long while there as well, it just, it led to a lot of mediocrity, 7 straight seasons outside the playoffs, and it's been really an up and down franchise since then. Last year, for instance, best in the West, right? And then in the first round, Colorado knocks them out. And then this year, they're kind of middling. Would they have actually made the playoffs? We may never find out. But they were kind of middling, and you can see some faults with the team. But they're definitely faults that could be cleaned up again next year. And who knows, maybe they're better again next year. I don't see them going through another 7-year drought without playoffs anytime soon. But they've been unpredictable, both in the positive and in the negative in their past, so we'll see. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And remember, stay home when you can. Stay safe whether you can or you can't. Make sure you wash your hands. And thank you guys so much for all your support during this time. I will talk to you again soon.